on one second. I'm so happy to see everybody here this evening. I was just doing a Facebook Live to try on this topic. I'm really excited about our mastermind. Great to see everybody. If you feel like it, love to see your face. I am going to record this if that's okay. We'll keep it on the mastermind playlist, and then you can refer back to it as you wish. I'm just really pleased to see everybody here. So tonight, what I want to do is, first of all, in respect to your time, I want to keep this to an hour. And I'm going to share with you some information. I want to start the hour off, the power hour, with some updates at a high level, sort of, what's going on in the market, some things that I have learned just this past week. And then we have a mixed group today. We have some people who have been through the training, and we have a bunch of agents who signed up for this who are brand new to short sales and pre-foreclosures, or they are, have a little bit of experience and really wanting to know what's going on. I'm so excited because, as you all know at this point, probably, I'm passionate about helping homeowners and helping realtors to serve this market segment. As we've discussed about before, and many of you may have experienced, all too often our brokers, the brokerages, and our leaders, team leaders, has been my experience, will say, don't work with short sales. You'll never make money. They'll never close. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because people take on listings that they aren't qualified to serve. Hey, William, thanks for coming on.
Hello.
Hi. We got a chance to meet at EXPCon, and he was always like, no video, no face. So it's nice to see you. Happy to see everybody. And I want this to truly be a mastermind. We have some agents joining us, like William's been doing some door knocking to share some of their experiences in actively working with distressed homeowners in our current market conditions. I am going to offer for you that are new, I do have an easy access way to learn, to build your skill, to create a foundation that you can feel competent and confident in starting this part of your business model. To give you a little background on that, all of last year when the market was so hot, I was kind of like this, I felt like this lone voice in Clubhouse. A lot of this grew out of Clubhouse discussions where, and some of you were part of it, where it's kind of like everybody's talking about multiple offers and spiking values. And with what I've seen in the mortgage crisis, it was like, and what I saw in terms of how the market was being reported, the sources that were used at the beginning of COVID to tell us everything's okay were, to my mind, suspect, like JP Morgan and Wells Fargo. They were the culprits in the mortgage crisis. I'm like, I might want to peel that back a little bit, check some other sources. At any rate, we have found, unfortunately, that the fragility in the economy that I saw and felt last year was indeed true. We're all seeing it now with market shifts being very dramatic since June. So it is a good time to ramp up if you're willing to take on a different part of the business. And it is a very viable part of a business. And so when people reached out to me earlier this year, Q1, like, where could they learn about short sales? There's CDPE training. All of the resources that I knew are really, really focused on short sales. There's Rob Jacobs with EXP. He gives an in-depth training. I haven't been part of it. I can't vouch for it or not. I am CDPE certified. I was one of the first in 2007 on the original program, and I got recertified under the new ownership, and highly recommend it. However, it's very tactical about short sales. So what happens with the homeowner today that has equity?
Hi, Joan.
Hi, Susanna. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing
I thought I
fine.
had everybody. Okay, who doesn't want to sell, who's facing foreclosure, and you'll hear from other people who've been reaching out to homeowners this year. It's been a very different dynamic. At one point, I called it like a forbearance hangover, because it was a little bit mind-boggling to me. In 2000, after the mortgage crisis, specializing in short sales, I had people reaching out to me for help. They knew they were underwater. There was still denial. There was still having to qualify the seller, people that, really somehow just couldn't connect with reality. In today's world, I'm finding a whole different struggle. And part of that, I don't want to get on a soapbox too much because we have a lot to cover, but part of it has to do with their stories not being told in the press. In the mortgage crisis, like I was in this situation early in 2007, there wasn't, and people were very negative about people facing foreclosure. It was sort of like, we don't want to help those losers. Why should we help them? Then it became a national crisis and everybody recognized it. It was still painful to go through. It was painful for people to ask for help. There was still a level of denial. However, sort of a collective consciousness, the whole country recognized this crisis. We have the exact opposite situation today, which ties into our talk about marketing and door knocking and how do you have these conversations, because the press, the mainstream press has been telling this story since the beginning of COVID. First, they talked about the forbearances being very positive, and for some they were. But what's not being covered is what happens for those people that actually went through hardship coming out of forbearance and weren't able to resolve it and were facing struggles. That story's not been told. So as you'll hear from some of the agents who went through my training who are working with people, one of the first things that comes out of their mouth, I hear it on the phone. Lillian Powers, I think, is going to join us a bit. I was on the phone with a woman she connected with in California. And the first thing out of her mouth was, I didn't do anything wrong. And that was just kind of heartbreaking because I realized there's so much negativity associated with foreclosure, as if you're a failure if you're in foreclosure, and homeowners coming out of forbearance. No, they didn't do anything wrong. They probably followed the instructions sent to them, but the complications and strings attached to forbearances and deferments, no one really explained it. There's Leah, who I work with as a negotiator, she has an attorney that she's working with in New York in litigation who has a lot of clients in this situation. There are actually some sort of, that's a whole nother level of that, of sort of deceptive lending practices of how these were presented. And I'm not going to try to go down that rabbit hole, but it's a very complicated situation. And so homeowners, they didn't, it's not like they signed up for a bad loan. They just took an offer that was presented to them that seemed reasonable. I probably would have also. And the complications coming out of it have them in a situation where, as Jeanette Wheeler in California called it, I'll give her credit in one of our clubhouse discussions, golden handcuffs. There's equity, but they can't access it because until the forbearance is brought whole and their payments are current for 90 days, they can't touch that equity. So that story's not been told. And when this reporter from Bloomberg reached out, it was a little sobering because he really didn't get it. He had no idea, he was in that means. And he's a real estate reporter for Bloomberg. So when we have, I always say, check your sources, because even some of the mainstream real estate news sources, I check Bloomberg every day, Fortune, some of these sources, some of the reporters, they're really not understanding. Now, I certainly hope he does. I hope he does unpack that story. Yeah, William, let's I'd love to do some networking here. I want to touch on a couple things on the industry. This update from the press was one of them. And then I also want to give you some insights I learned from the negotiator asset manager that I work with. But would you like to go through around and quickly introduce yourselves so we can network? And then I want to get into unpacking some of the marketing resources that we have. So, okay, yeah, if you want to put in the chat where you're from and your contact information, and then feel free to, ask questions in the chat, jump in. Yeah, I do want to share this other, update. I was talking to, again, my main negotiator. It's good to have more than one, who still has a little bit of involvement from the asset management side, and she gets the inside scoop on what the banks are doing. this was, I was talking to her 2 days ago, and she said that she works for one of the top 5 and all the other banks tend to follow suit. What they're doing is, as some of you who've been involved in these discussions, we've been covering the foreclosure trends where, from the 5-Star Conference, we learn from Desiree, we learn from different people who've gone to those conferences, as well as, Joe Scarice and people who works with Blackstone. The focus with the bank-owned foreclosure, and that matches what I'm seeing in the street in my area, has been more of a flipping mentality. This is part of what kept the foreclosures hidden, because you have a lot of Wall Street acquisition of distressed properties, because they're looking at, with the artificial intelligence, this was last year and this year, looking at that equity and aggressively wanting to acquire these properties to sell or to hold as a rental or to have as an asset. And one of the things that she was cluing me into is, as we all know, the shift has been pretty dramatic the last few months. The banks are seeing that the equity that they have on the books for these properties now, that they're not going to be able to have that equity in a few months. They won't appraise at that number in 3 to 6 months. So they're changing gears. It's almost like a complete 360, because they've going from aggressively trying to acquire distressed properties as an asset that they can make money on. And in fact, we have some anecdotal stories of people involved with pre-foreclosure situations where they brought a cash offer before the auction, and literally the bank on a recorded lines became difficult and said, "We want your house." When they found out there was a buyer involved, it became uncooperative because they wanted the house. They're changing gears, and this is some good news for us that are doing proactive marketing. What she was explaining is they're doing a lot of direct mail campaigns for people who've been missing payments, encouraging them to get help, encouraging them to apply for loan modification, encouraging them to get pre-approved for a short sale. So those of us like William, who are brave enough to go out and door knock, she was saying it's a good time for us to door knock, because the banks are sending out these massive mailings. And here as a realtor, you show up, and this is what we go through in the class of how to have a message of "I'm here to help" versus "I have a cash buyer," because they don't want to hear that I have a cash buyer. They're getting a lot of that. They think that they can keep their house. So with that message of "I'm here to help," being able to refer to a HUD counselor, being able to help them through the loan modification, they probably will have to sell, but that's not what they want to hear. So she was saying that should help us with our marketing, that they should be more receptive, that this is a good time to ramp up this part of your business, to stay consistent, because it can get, I do it when you don't get a response on a postcard mailing, or, it can feel a little discouraging. So it's good to know that the banks are actually, I don't say it's good news because it reflects declining values. However, the homeowners, this will help with that mindset that I was discussing earlier, where they're, as if there's no problem, as somehow some of the owners I've talked to, it's almost like they think that the government's somehow going to save them, even though the auction's only a few weeks away. Because I think that's what I call that forbearance stupor. Like there's some kind of weird mentality, like something magic's going to happen and somebody's going to stop the foreclosure for them, which isn't the case. So she was saying that they're anticipating ramp up of foreclosures by March of 2023. And their concern is, they don't want to have these distressed assets on their books. So it's a major shift from banks selling whole portfolios of distressed homes that have equity to institutional investors, to more of a mindset of we have to protect our business from the nightmare they were in the mortgage crisis, where they had all these distressed assets on their books. And that made them as a banking institution, vulnerable and not viable. So between now and March of next year, it's a prime time to build up this part of your business. And you're a little ahead of the curve, because a lot of realtors, a lot of practitioners, there's been an increase in interest, but this has been a part of the market that's frankly been ignored. And most people aren't really interested in serving this market segment. So those are the big kind of like points of information that I wanted to share. I would love to open the floor. Fred, I'm so glad you can make it. We have some people here that are just experts, and we have some people that are brand new. What I would love to do is focus on, first of all, if you're brand new, like I said, don't worry. I have you covered with this video module training, which I'll do a screen share and show you how easy it is to access information and how you can learn. But for tonight, truly to keep in the mindset of a mastermind, would love to hear from people who are actively trying to work with homeowners or actively working with homeowners, what you're hearing, what you're seeing, if you're wholesaling, or if you're door knocking or working with a wholesaler, having conversations, negotiating, anything that you'd like to share. William, do you want to start? You're in Texas, where you have the unique challenge of 21 days from notice to foreclosure, right?
Yes. So here in Texas, it's like a blink of an eye, so you have 21 days before it goes to auction. So I did take the SFR training for short sales, but then I realized that it takes 3 to 6 months to do that. So a lot of these people don't get a lot of chance to even think about that, but it is a way to kind of teach them about things. But most of the time I find out that they're like an ostrich, their head's missing. Sometimes you go knock on their door and they don't even know that it's up for auction. So it's there's a lot of them here. There's a lot of them here in Texas and Houston. And it's kind of, for me, the marketing to it is kind of difficult because you can't really set them on a drip or anything like that. It's just one shot and maybe you'll get a call back. And it's only a few days, before they go to auction. What about the other states? I see some people from Florida. I don't know how long it takes. I don't know what you guys do for marketing. I basically send out like a brochure, and it has like their choices, what they're facing. So we can either list it, we can short sell it, or we can try to do something with it. I do have a list of investors that are willing to make up their payments, and take the property. But for me, the marketing of it is very difficult here in Texas, just because there's so little time to do so.
That's a unique challenge, and I loved how you shared with me that you go and put the trifold brochure in an envelope in the door, because that's kind of like a hybrid of door knocking. I get a little intimidated about door knocking. There you go. He has this beautiful brochure. It's in, I've saved it. Yeah, exactly. Now, I did want to clarify, William, I don't know I took SFR, but honestly, it was like back in 2008, maybe. I don't know what they're teaching these days, but short sales, there's a lot of misinformation. It doesn't take 6 to 9 months to do a short sale. If that's something that, like in your situation in a state like yours, and Fred, feel free to jump in here, but if you can open the dialogue with the bank through, like that's where I use the HUD counselor, or someone who can open the dialogue with the bank, either with an investor like you have, or maybe even express offers through EXP, and get the auction stalled and start a short sale. Short sales can close in 90 days. There are exceptions, complicated ones. I have had a few that went on because of many, many complicated situations. Mm-hmm. Also had one that closed in 45 days, which is also an exception. So, it can be done as long as the bank is willing to allow the process. I would think, never done it in Texas, in that kind of dynamic. However, getting the dialogue open to have them talk to a HUD counselor in that 21 days to see what can be done to stall the foreclosure and create an opportunity. You know, that's the kind of, you know, almost guerrilla warfare tactics that we might want to try now. And let me read over here. So Amy wanted to know, can you share more about how your investors come in to make up payments? Is that part of the purchase transaction, or is there a nuance to the transaction? I think, Amy, it sounds like you're referring to some of the more creative finance things that people talk about on Clubhouse. In terms of typically what I'm seeing with investors is if there's equity, you can put together a cash deal and close it before the auction. But, you know, William, she wanted to know more about what your investors are proposing.
They have their, they have very creative ways of doing things, and it's not a way that the homeowner can stay in the property. It's a way for them to stop the foreclosure, and then so that they'll have to deed the house over to the investors. So these people are foreclosures are heavily targeted by investors for that reason, because a lot of them have equity in it that's just going to go to to whoever buys it at the auction. So they'll make up the payments, they'll get the deed transferred to their name, and then they'll do something with it creatively, as far as maybe like owner finance it to somebody else, but by then the house is under the investor's name, but the loan still under the original seller's credit until it gets bought or sold, or something happens to the property. But it's just a different way of creatively doing it.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
I think in the state of New Jersey, where I'm from, and I could be wrong, but I'm under the impression that the deed and the promissory note have to kind of stay together like a marriage. And it sounds like what you're saying is that the homeowner is taking their deed, which they have title to, and they're assigning their deed to somebody else who now has deed to the property or title to the property, yet they still owe the lender their note because they still have that promise to pay to the lender. Is that correct?
Correct.
So in theory, they could, if they don't have a trusting relationship with the person that they just signed their deed over to, that person could really screw them, because now they've got technically the house, and the guy who used to live there technically has the note to the house, but doesn't have the house anymore, correct?
Yes, that's a possibility.
And I think but I'm afraid I could be wrong, but in New Jersey, that might be illegal on the seller's behalf when they sign that. And Susanna, you may be able to help me out. Pennsylvania is saying that you may not be able to do that in New Jersey. And again, people do things they're not supposed to do, but that may potentially put the seller at some kind of risk of fraud by taking that marriage of deed and promissory note and separating them and giving them the two separate, to having two separate parties have them.
Yeah, I'm going to put a little point of clarification here, and then I really want to move on to a different, because I am not that's called subject to. And there are a lot of wholesalers out, and there are a lot of people in Clubhouse pitching this. And there's some significant risks. It's not, and that's exactly what happens is, there are some people who do subject to with additional documentation to perhaps, but it's very, very risky. I'm talking again to the same source that I use for negotiation, who has the inside with the lenders. We were discussing this because I started hearing about it on Clubhouse. I'm like, this sounds really dangerous. And she said, yes, right now, because even one of the gentlemen who does this on Clubhouse, he was saying his brother, or someone who works for a bank, said about over 30% of the defaulting mortgages that they have, the deed and the note don't match. And there are a lot of lawsuits that are unfolding from this practice. It's not currently, according to my source, it's not currently illegal. However, it is on the way to become illegal. And that is something Fannie Mae is pushing through. So unfortunately, that can put the homeowner at legal risk, because if they received a payment, which that's part of the, like Helen Ann, I'll give you $10,000. I'm gonna, pay your mortgage, you sign the deed over to me. What happens when market shifts like they are now, and maybe I have a master lease, I did something else, and the dominoes start falling, whoever is supposed to be paying that note, if they stop paying it, that homeowner can end up in default again with no home. And some of the negotiators in New Jersey that I connect with, they're getting those calls. They're getting calls from homeowners who are now in foreclosure who don't own the home. And there's nothing anyone can do for them because they don't have the asset anymore. So subject to is something I personally want to stay completely away from. I'm waiting for someone to prove me wrong, that there's a good solid way for this to work and have the homeowner protected. But I certainly don't want to take too much time tonight on that because, I'm not saying, I know people do it, but there are indeed legal risks. Just like it may not be illegal now, but you can't guarantee that when that law passes or when that changes, that your investor and the homeowner might be subject to legal action. But Fred, thank you so much. You're so courteous to raise your hand. Love to give you the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. Once again, thank you, Susanna, for doing this mastermind session and always an opportunity to learn. So a couple quick things here about that specific topic. The gentleman William just spoke about, right?
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, Fred. Could you give a little background on yourself? People don't know you. They need to really understand the power of your background. So.
I'm a fan of Susanna and what she's doing here, but I'm a real estate licensed associate broker in New York City. I started real estate in 2014. Prior to that, I used to buy properties in Connecticut. My brother and business partner didn't know too much about it. 2000, 2007, 2008. And we'd show up, you'd buy a property, show up with your car keys and a pen, and you leave the closing with another set of keys and an apartment or a property, right? Knew nothing about the game. When the adjusted rate mortgage changed, that's when I knew there's something in my gut that told me that that wasn't a proper proceeding, right? So I was the one who received the 10 or 15 phone calls from Bank of America every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes. They never checked the notes. And I started noticing how a major disconnect was taking place. I was never in real estate at that time. We just used to buy properties. Obviously, a lot of people did it then. When I got into real estate in 2014 in Queens, my broker said short sales don't close, and I was destined to prove him wrong. So I started the process of learning about short sales, tapping every source and every class and every training that I could get to learn. So spin the wheel or push the train a couple years later, I've kind of really taken a tenacity, not only to doing distressed property sales, but sales of any kind, co-ops, condos. I do a little bit of commercial as well, regular residential sales. But I think the most instrumental part of my training has come in understanding short sales and being very vigilant about the entire process from the beginning till the very end, right? So as of now, I have a lot of people who call me up and say, Fred, can you help us with the short sale? Can you help us with this? Not to get into the numbers, but quite a few sometimes that it does become a little bit challenging and overwhelming, but we're dealing with need. And I recall back in 2007, 2008, where I didn't know what was going on and really didn't have any resources. So that's kind of my background. With respect to what William just said, couple things, right? We say sometimes that when two people meet, one has the money and one has the knowledge. At the end of that exchange, the one of the knowledge is going to get the money, and the one of the money is going to get the knowledge. Did I say right? Two people meet, one has knowledge and one has money, right? The one of the knowledge is going to get his money, and the one of the money, they're going to get the knowledge. And that knowledge they're going to learn is that process is totally out of line. Just like Leslie just mentioned, Helen just mentioned, right? When you sign a regular mortgage, you know that even transferring the deed into an LLC could actually signal the bank to actually accelerate the loan. So you already know that that's totally out of line. Forget about the property being in any distressed condition, just a regular loan on itself, right? If you even took the loan and put it into a trust, you could expose yourself if the bank find out later to actually accelerate the mortgage. And what does that mean? Acceleration of the mortgage means they say, pay us everything you owe us now. We'll see you later. You'll see us later. We'll go our merry ways, right? First problem with doing that. The second thing is when you're doing a short sale, who are you representing? You're working for are we working? What is our fiduciary duty? fiduciary duty, all call, obedience, loyalty, disclosure, confidentiality, accountability, reasonable care is not to the buyer, not mine. My fiduciary duty is to the seller, right? By having a seller, just like Ellen just said, walk away because they don't know any better than a time of strife and stress, right? Sign off that deed. They're still on the hook. Let's just say that again. They're still on the hook, right? For that particular mortgage. And one other thing too here that I just noted as well is as I look through these, again, my opportunity to try to help people, I go into a lot of cases. I not only deal with just the loan itself, I go into e-courts. In New York City, we have an e-court process that enables you to go into these different counties and actually see the court records and the decisions. Let me share with you all right now. Some of the banks are actually imposing deficiency judgments, which I've never seen before. I looked at 2-3 loans the other day, and not only did they do the foreclosure, there's a specific part where it says deficiency judgment. What is a deficiency judgment? A deficiency judgment means that your loan, you owed the bank states that you owed $700,000. They sold it at the auction steps for $500,000. The gap is called a deficiency. That deficiency is $200,000. They are actually, whether they will enforce them or not is another story, but I've never seen that before. So I'm actually seeing deficiency judgment. And anybody wants, text me, email me, I'll send you the court records, the public information, whether they're actually going forth the deficiency judgments. That means you've signed over the deed. This particular buyer, whoever they are, investor, flipper, whatever you want to call them, has taken over possession and control of your particular property. And if the deal works, well and good for them, hopefully for you as well. If the deal doesn't work, they'll be having cappuccino coffee the next morning outside a restaurant while you have a deficiency judgment of $200,000 or $250,000. What is it? No, don't do it. So I'm sorry to butt in like that, Susanna, but I just wanted to make sure if we're discussing this and we're having a mastermind session, let's put out the ideas here. Let's put out what we see so we can explore it further, right? But we're not misinformed. And I just wanted to share that, and I'll take back my space. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I was honored. Fred was part of my prototype class in April, and has become I'm one of his biggest fans, I think. He's very, very knowledgeable and passionate on this subject, digs into things in a way that, is a rare person who takes that kind of approach with short sales. And I agree completely. Even one of the speakers on Clubhouse who was promoting this type of investing, and she does it a lot, she even said, as long as everyone keeps paying, and I wanted to unpack that so much. Exactly. What happens when people stop paying? And then you have a homeowner, like Fred said, they have no reason to keep paying if the numbers stop working for them. And they can't negotiate with the bank because they're not on the note. The original homeowner is still on the note. So they can just walk away. And you have not only the deficiency, so you have the potential, like you got to put yourself in the seller's shoes, right? To me, like this is my passion with this business. And yes, it works for the buyer, but it has to work for the seller. It has to work for the distressed seller, and everything unfolds from there. Yeah, there are good buy opportunities. There are good investment opportunities. However, it has to work for this distressed seller. And what if they end up, moving on, get over the death, the illness, whatever caused the situation? Imagine, fast forward 3 years from now they're facing foreclosure again. They may have repaired their credit, trying to buy a house finally, thinking, hey, now we can get on our feet. Now they might be forced not only into foreclosure, but bankruptcy because of that deficiency judgment. And no one can help them. We can't help someone who doesn't have the house. We can't negotiate with the bank on a defaulted loan when there's no asset. So it's, what the good news is, when there's equity and they're facing a foreclosure auction, at least in states like Pennsylvania, where there's a little more time than perhaps 21 days, with a 21-day scenario, the key is to get the foreclosure auction stalled so that you can have the time to bring in an investor who can get it closed. We need at least 2 weeks because of our title process in Pennsylvania. Some people can do it faster, but for me, that's the winning opportunity. And a lot of people from EXP have joined this group. We have the option of offering an express offers cash investment offer, a valid offer. So you could bring a cash offer if there's equity. get it sold before the auction in other ways than that. But I see a couple hands raised. Helena, or is that from before? Fred, I think, and
But this is
Helena.
actually new.
Oh, okay, go ahead, Helena.
Let me get my hand down real quick. Just a quick with regards to Fred, had you not seen deficiency judgments before and now you're seeing them?
I never seen in the last, honestly, the last 4 years, I've never seen it. I knew about deficiency judgment. I understood what they meant, but I never actually seen it, right? Right now, in the judgment, I mean, it always stated that, I mean, whenever the process, list pendant, summons a complaint, in the summons, they actually have to articulate or specify what exactly their intents are at the end of when this is over, right? So some of them may put deficiency judgment, but they may not really pursue it. I'm specifically saying, I'm going to try to find the article and post it so everyone can see. I'm specifically saying there's actually a section where it says deficiency judgment, colon, and then the exact amount there, right? So if the judgment is given, if the judgment is given by the court, then it's only about enforcing it. So whether they'll have that enforced, whether they'll decide to pursue that is another issue. But this is something I've actually seen. I've seen it in two different, totally separate. I think one is in the Bronx, one is in Brooklyn, and I'm like stunned.
I had seen deficiency judgments a lot in short sales that I had done back in like between 2007 and 2009. I sell primarily second homes, resort property. So luckily for me, many of the distressed properties that I would sell were second homes. So I didn't really have my clients losing their home. So it was more helping them get over the emotional hurdle of let's clean this up fast and not lose the roof over our head. And many of these people tended to have two mortgages. So you were trying to negotiate first and seconds. And it was not uncommon in the second home to have a deficiency judgment attached, language attached into that short sale approval. But at the time, and I don't know if it's the case now, but at the time, there used to be federal law that you could file for insolvency through your tax return and basically have that judgment become a wash. And I don't know if that law, again, I'm sort of now getting back into it. Susanna kind of piqued my interest a couple of months ago when I heard her talking this conversation. I was like, I know a lot about this. Is there something going on I don't know about? And started checking some of her sources. I'm like, shit, she's right. There's something going on here, but none of us know about. So I'm kind of thinking I had that experience. I'm just trying to get back into it. So I was just curious about you not seeing them more recently, and now you're seeing that come along. Like Susanna was saying, it may be a way for these banks to try to recapture back some of that equity that they are fearing that they're losing by going after that homeowner like that.
I believe whatever, we're just connecting the dots here as well. But when I saw the first one, I was kind of taken surprised. And I saw the second, I was like, all right, this is not taking place for nothing, right? Another piece that I also shared, something that I just saw yesterday too as well, even when individuals file bankruptcy, I noticed now that they're actually after 3, I think it's not what I read yesterday in a different file, it seemed that 3 may be the maximum, right? So that means that they're actually asking the federal court, the trustee, and putting it in that third filing that after this, you cannot file another bankruptcy, right? So there's a gentleman who we kept trying to assist him. I mean, he actually had a buyer. The sad part about it is they actually had equity in the property. And he was under the apparently now mistaken belief that he could file the fourth bankruptcy. And it clearly delineated it in the federal document that he will not be permitted to do so. Either he didn't read it or whoever assisted him didn't explain it to him. So they actually sold his property, I think October 6th.
We have a couple of people in New Jersey like that, Helen, and some agents that were in the May class who are working in Bergen County, and a couple of people that one of the ladies that I helped them with, she had filed like 3 bankruptcies, and another one who what is it called, an adjournment, I think, in New Jersey, and you can only do that like 3 times.
Correct. You have a chance to kind of buy yourself a stay as that seller or homeowner, but it's something that runs out and then, your feet are on
exactly. And in this situation, she had done that 3 times. And so we got all involved with the negotiator and, Lamont and Yvette, and they were passionately, we were all trying to help her, and we almost made it happen, but they wouldn't postpone it because she had done it 3 times and hadn't used the time to come up with a solution, which is part of that mindset, like something's miraculously going to change. But regarding deficiency judgment, I had the exact same experience, Helen, as I started in Hawaii, which was the second home market. The challenge there was more so high net worth individuals who were like, they just never, ever saw themselves in this situation, like foreclosure happens to those people, not us, that was more of the denial. I was doing the negotiations myself at that time, and I found there was a big push for no interest, 10,000, something. It was like they had to show something on their books. And that's what I came to understand with the second. A lot of times it's like, oh, I get it. They're like a debt collector. They had to show something. However, maybe around 2009, it shifted with the bailout and the dynamic shifted. In the meantime, George Bush had put through in 2007 the Debt Forgiveness Act, where the deficiency forgiven, which triggers a 1099 for taxes the following January, that became very attractive because at least they're not being taxed on the debt forgiveness. However, I think 2016 was the last year that it kept getting extended. I had clients in 2014 and 15 to where even it was like Congress, it was on then January would get passed and we'd be like the exhale, okay, but that no longer exists. So that's something we cover in the training of how to talk to your potential seller about the pros and cons of a short sale. Certainly a 1099 on the debt forgiveness is better than a foreclosure. And I always refer, when we talk about the power team, a CPA, we're not CPAs, or even if we are, we're working as a realtor, we can't give tax advice, but there can be some insolvency, measures that they could take to minimize the tax impact of the debt forgiveness. Now, when we go through the training on the sellers, I explain that's my experience. That's the very first thing they ask for. I've had sellers like put my feet to the fire, like they wouldn't move forward unless I could guarantee debt forgiveness. And so we explain the process as you educate sellers and where you see that. Sometimes I've taken another short sale approval letter and, redacted the name and the address to show an example of an approval letter, because we won't get any answer. It kind of ties into your question, lady. See, there's 3 phases of the negotiation. You won't get any answer for buyer or seller until the start at like the 3rd phase, and that could usually is in the 60 to 80 day time frame, depending on the complications on the situation. Anything could happen. So, those are really, really good points. And these are things that we cover in the training to give you a foundation. And I always suggest to invest more in your knowledge. I think Helen Ann, Fred, myself, we're all members, have gone through the CDPE training. Highly suggest that. I'll show you in the link. However, if you want to, like the video-based training I provide, it gives you a foundation, just like an orientation to be able to assimilate more information and put it into practice. They are just rolling out, and Fred, you're involved. I know CDPE just as announced a couple of weeks ago their advanced marketing program. I don't know the fee, but it's basically a way they offer a website, monthly marketing materials, because marketing, I always wanted to touch on marketing and outreach tonight, and what people are doing to reach homeowners, because it is, as William said, it is such a challenge, no matter the state. You're not alone, William, even with Pennsylvania, which is a much longer process, it's so hard to, I don't know, I question myself all the time, like, could I do it better? What could I do differently to be more effective in reaching them? And, the only answer, I finally did my first door knocking. I had never done that before. I'm a baby on that part, but mostly I've used direct mail. I do use strips because we do have a little bit of time. But I would love to have any thoughts about marketing, how to reach people. I also know, Lady C, you had a question. Did you get my answer in the chat? Did you want to unpack that situation a little bit, or you got it? Okay.
Yeah, it really wasn't. I had a buyer that put an offer accepted on a house, and they never responded, and the agent just never understood why. They provided all the documents that were needed, and at that point my buyer was kind of tired and interest rates were going up, and I don't know what else could have been, what else we could have done to kind of push this along. And I just didn't know if banks had an obligation, I know that obviously they don't have an obligation to anything, but I would figure that they want their client also to get their money somehow or another without losing more out of this.
I'm smiling because so many times I felt like so frustrated with how banks behave. And I kind of tried to stay out of the frustration zone and recognize that we have no control of them, but all we can do is navigate more effectively. And I'm so sorry you went through that. When we go through, I think it's module 3 on the training, talking about buyers is exactly why, because it can be a horrible experience going into what feels like a black hole, depending on who the listing agent is, how they're handling the short sales. And I've created some sort of, I personally have some red flags when I look at listings and I see how the listing agent, I'm qualifying the opportunity for my buyers because it is a risk. If they don't have someone like Fred on the file, who's that proactive and knowledgeable, who are they using for negotiations? How knowledgeable is the agent, how to qualify the opportunity for our buyers? Because even if you don't really want to work with short sales, as you explained, sooner or later in your career, you're going to meet somebody who wants to make an offer. Either they love that property and it happens to be a short sale, or they're looking for an under market value. And without the right, depending on who's on the other side of it and who the team members are, it can be a horrible experience like you experienced, or it can be a collaborative, positive experience for the best results for everyone. But the banks truly only care about the banks. That's all they care about. But anybody else that has feedback for her, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I could say this too, Susanna. I mean, it could also not have been necessarily the bank. It could have been just the knowledge and the competency level of that particular person. I mean, personally myself, I would not entertain or engage a buyer trying to buy a short sale. I just wouldn't do it. And I just wouldn't do it. I would represent the seller on that side, but I would, at least in the New York City area, I can't speak for all different parts of the country, but in New York City, you don't know the training, the capability, the capacity, the desire, the passion, the drive of that particular person. So it's unfortunate for your buyer. It may not be the bank, and let's also give credit where credit is due. There are some entities which they're not, quote unquote, the standard traditional banks. I mean, these are hedge funds that have set up other financial entities. Trust you me, you call, they respond right away. They may start working at 5 p.m., whatever the case is. They may not be like Wells Fargo, Mr. Cooper, open till 9, but they will respond, right? So we don't really know that. We don't really know what type of institution it was. Was it an institution that regularly responds on time? Or what was the capability and the capacity of that particular agent who's actually handling the short sale, right? So we critique them where critiques have to be given and have to be done. But some of those smaller entities, they move fast. And that is big and laborious as some of the bigger entities as well. So it could have been that agent who just didn't have the capacity to actually manage this particular transaction.
Yeah, it just seemed like every time I wanted to get an update from my buyer, something new, the bank wanted something new, updated tax returns, even though they provided that information. And it was a ball of, a lot of stuff falling. Then the person that was initially on the file no longer was on the file. So a new person came into play and they started the whole thing all over again. So it was like I was not getting answers, and if I was getting the correct answers, it was just getting nowhere. And at that point, like I said, my clients were just tired of waiting and decided to go elsewhere.
Right. And again, when you're dealing in this sphere that we're dealing with, we're not dealing with a 2 or 3 or 20 size employee company. You're dealing with a bank. You're dealing with Wells Fargo is a $1.5 trillion bank, right? So if your approach is, I'll wait till they'll call me. Well, keep waiting, right? Good luck when they call you back. There has to be a certain approach, and you need to make it clear that you're just not
Is it me, Fred, or did we lose you in the matrix a little bit?
Oh, I thought it was me too.
Oh, I love your hat, Lily.
Yeah, I decided, let me cover that up. Okay.
I like that.
Kind of not have that kind of overwork. You have not could have been the agent themselves. First and foremost, everything should have been submitted at the beginning. Should have received a confirmation that everything is in hand. So 2 months later or a month later, there is no question as to whether everything was ready in place, right? Because then your second email says you confirmed on such and such a day. You're showing where they kind of dropped the ball. But everything should have been in place the first submission, not send pieces piecemeal, right? Again, I can't speak as to what the competency was, but these are things that we hopefully this mastermind session helps us to learn and understand as well.
As a buyer's agent, and that end, I was the buyer's agent. Am I able to go above, like, what else could have I done instead of following up every week? Is there anything else that I, as a buyer's agent, could have done?
Well, if I could jump in here, first of all, I'm a little confused as a buyer's agent why you would be communicating with the bank. And secondly, why they were asking for tax returns from your buyer. Those are things that they're
Oh.
asking for from the seller.
Exactly. They weren't asking it from me. That was what the agent informed me of.
Okay, so it sounds like, and this circles back to Lily's question, right? Of how do you qualify an opportunity? You know, because I have, you know, in the training, you know, like it's very important to me when I have a short sale listing that I do everything I can to support the buyer's agent and the buyer. So, because I explained to everyone that in the beginning, yes, once you have a contract between buyer and seller, then we are all on one side of the table, basically, and the lender's on the other. And this is what makes a difference, as Fred was unpacking, you know, how you make notes, how you escalate things, how, you know, you need someone on the file representing the seller who's going to take that kind of action. To Lily's question, how do you find out if the agent, either the agent or the negotiator involved need to be at the level of Fred's skill? So Lily, to your question, how do you know that looking at a listing? And this is something that I always like, they say trust but verify. In qualifying the opportunity, one of the things that I look at first and foremost is, yes, do they have anything in the agent remarks? You know, how have they listed it? Did they list it with the commission subject to lien holder approval? There should be uploaded in the MLS along with the seller's disclosure, lead-based disclosure, anything that your state requires, an instructions for offer, because each state has different, that shows, like, as a practitioner, I have instructions for an offer, like, you know, give us at least 90 days. And on the addendum that Pennsylvania requires, on this, mark this, you know, you want to have instructions for the offer very clear for a buyer's agent. You know, the negotiators, Leah and William, who I work with, they get involved from the very beginning at the time I take the listing. So they actually have an agreement for the buyer to sign as well as an agreement for the seller to sign. And they have open communication with all parties. So with, you know, they have, the negotiator has an open dialogue with the buyer's agent and the buyer, and that makes a completely different dynamic. Otherwise, the seller's agent, you have to just count on the updates from the seller's agent. And many people practice a model, and when we get into the power team and talk about it, and I mistakenly have used a couple different law firms here in Pennsylvania, they're based out of New Jersey, handling files after I moved here and wasn't doing them myself anymore. And they just are kind of like, there are a lot of short sale sweatshops. I call them that because that's like a paralegal type person. These are law firms. And I thought, oh, ESQ, like there's a lawyer on case. Okay, great, you know. But in actuality, the lawyer wasn't involved at all. You had to get the contract before they ever got involved. And once you have the agreement, they just basically pushed it through Equator, you know, tracking tasks, blah, blah, blah. Truly not negotiators, didn't know how to do the kind of escalation that Fred's talking about, don't know how to, you know, record phone calls. And it is frustrating. It was explained to me the other day from the asset management standpoint, like there's a reason that there's a different person you talk to every time, because that way they're not bribable in essence. However, they don't make notes in their files. So working with a negotiator that takes notes of the calls, whether you're doing a loan modification or they're doing a short sale. That's a specialized skill, which is partly why I did this training, because that truly is a specialized skill that I do that Wayne's World I'm not worthy, take my hat off for. No pun intended, Lily, but because it takes that kind of dedication. And unfortunately, like I see luxury short sales. I don't see what you're seeing on the shore, Helen Ann, but I see luxury short sales on the main line where, of course, the owner trusted the luxury agent they knew, but the agent doesn't know anything about short sales. I can see it languishing on the market with no offer. One of the things CDPE trains us is you keep dropping the price until you get an offer. You want to start that file. Seeing these expired short sales hit the market is heartbreaking because they trusted a realtor. I'm tracking them in my area, and about a third of them, by the time they expire, they're already owned by the bank. So why the agent would take them on is beyond me. It's like, why would I take on a commercial listing? I don't know how to do commercial, right? I should refer it to another agent, get a referral fee, or do it together or something, but it's not my specialty. But there are a lot of agents and they think that they just can get the file. Some of them in the luxury market in my area, because sometimes I've had calls from family members of the seller who are represented by different agent. They let the client do everything. The client's supposed to call the lawyer and the client's supposed to call the bank, and they just taking the listing and putting it up. That's all they're doing. So if you don't see any documentation about who the negotiator is, how to write an offer, anything in the agent remarks that indicate, terms or clarification, or like there's one luxury short sale I've been tracking in my area. I tried to reach the owner, and I get it. People like to go with someone they know, like, and trust. She has had it at 1.9 now for probably 6 months. It took 3 or 4 different outreaches from me for her to finally answer that, yes, she had a negotiator. No details provided, no price adjustments, nothing. Unfortunately, I've seen, since I moved to Philadelphia and tracking, the luxury market here, a high rate of failure in the luxury market because the agents that serve that segment, for whatever reason, because of the relationship, they take the listing, but they're not willing to, in my opinion, take seriously the need for their client. So as a buyer's agent, sometimes this is part of the reason I put this video module training together, because as much as we might want to stay away from this segment, sometimes somebody just, like I sold a short sale in Coatesville a couple of years ago, and it was the first time home buyer had bought it. It was a townhome. It needed a little bit of work, but it was like this first time home buyer, she just loved it. She wanted that home. So sometimes, you'll find a buyer. Other types of buyers, like when I had a bigger Google presence on Hawaii for short sales and got everybody wanted a foreclosure in Hawaii, right? They wanted a discount resort home. And I would caution my buyers, and something we go over in the training, sometimes the best deal is not, if they're just looking for a deal, then you want to open the conversation as a realtor, say maybe a probate sale, a tired listing, a motivated seller can often be a much better match, to Fred's point, where you won't have those risks like you ran into Lady C. However, it is helpful to know enough to be able to be effective or network with someone to help you. And I haven't done this yet, but I theoretically, politely, with Aloha, would like to, if my buyer wanted like that luxury, would the listing agent allow us to help her and her client by bringing in a different negotiating source to help everybody get to the table? In theory, it works, but I can't say that I've actually done it, because I've considered it. But a lot of times egos are involved, and, they're not willing to make a change, but it is a real risk.
Can I hop in and help say something real quick? And
Yeah.
with regard to how do I know, how do I know if the agent's experienced, or how do I know they're a knucklehead? Once you guys have some training under your belt, you're going to know the questions to ask. And it may just simply be, hey, my name's Helen Ann. Hi, Susanna. I saw your short sale listing. I have some questions. I have some buyers that are interested. Tell me what's going on with your sellers. Where are you guys in the short sale process? And if she says, well, we're nowhere, we're just waiting to get an offer, and then I'm going to call the bank. Oh, okay. You're going to call the bank yourself. Do you have a lawyer or a negotiator helping you with this? Do you have any? You can ask them some discovery questions. Or if she says, oh, we've already contacted the bank, we've already completed their modification package, we've already completed our hardship letter, all of our stuff has been submitted, we're already communicating, we just need that offer to get this process started. Oh, okay, that tells me Susanna knows a little bit about what she's doing, and her client is now also already participating in doing what she's supposed to do. Or Susanna might say, hey, I really know what I'm doing, but my people are getting divorced, they're fighting, it's been really ugly, I'm having a hard time having them communicate. Then you might say, well, she knows what she's doing, but she's got people who she's going to have a battle ahead of her, and she may be able to get them on board. Do we want to hang in there until that happens? You know what I mean? So once you guys have more information, you'll know better questions to ask. And then you're going to know right after a couple of minutes of exchange, whether the person that you're working with has backup and is getting help and knows what they're doing and has cooperative clients, or they've had a battle since day one and their battle does not need to become yours. And perhaps you and your buyer should move on, or at that point. And sometimes you do find as you're talking to them, that person may confide in you and say, I've never done this before. She's actually my aunt and my uncle, and I've never done a short sale. I really don't know what I'm doing. Oh my gosh, let me help you. Let me tell you a little bit about my experience. Let me tell you some of the training that I've had. Maybe we can collaborate together and help them get out of there. And let's always come from a place of a helpful heart as agents. Our goals are always to try to bring buyer and seller together and at the table feel like everybody's one, even in a distressed situation. Remember, we're getting this monkey off of somebody's back, and it may have been their primary residence, but now they're going to have that fresh start. They got themselves into trouble, and now it's time to put that chapter behind and to look forward and not look back. So once you get more information, you'll be able to ask better questions. I just wanted to, just share that piece with you guys.
Thank you.
That's wonderful, Helena. And that's just so helpful. And absolutely, yes, the training is important. And as the red flag is, like when we go through the CDPE training, and we cover this at a high level in my video training, is, how to qualify your seller. And one of the first things, like, you shouldn't have been in a situation where, let me see if I can make this gallery so everybody can see each other. Sorry. You shouldn't have been in a situation where you're waiting for the seller to provide their taxes. One of our coaching tips in CDPE trains is we have to qualify our sellers on a short sale. And I do reiterate that, in the video training, giving them a list of things to do, because if they're not functional, it will never work. If they are so, and I always coach my sellers, you're going to have to provide this. I coach buyers and buyer agents too. Expect a little bit of a black hole. Then the bank is going to ask for things. They want an ink signature and they want it in 24 hours. So be ready for nothing. And then a quick, oh my God, I got to get to Staples and scan this over to Helen Ann. So when you future pace people, an experienced agent will do that. They'll future pace them for what to expect. But the listing agent should have those financials up front, with the listing contract. That's a red flag right there. If they don't, like, you can ask the question, like you said, have they tried a loan modification? Because if they're coming out of forbearance, that means that the bank already has a lot of their documentation. If they've done a loan modification, that means the bank already has a lot of their documentation. They'll just need to update it. It's not like they're starting from square one. And it also means that they're proactive. They've been trying to find a solution. They've been working with everything and running into walls. Great, we can put together a collaborative solution to help them and match the right property for your client. So those all tie into the red flags. And Lawrence, I see your question, and that is a very good question. Actually, I've seen it both ways in terms of the fee for the transaction, for the negotiation. There are, I had worked with where it's paid, quote unquote, on the seller side for quite some time. That's how the law firms I worked with did it. I didn't charge a negotiation fee when I did it myself. I just had my commission. And by the way, I haven't seen commissions discounted in years. Not to say it couldn't happen, but people tell you, oh, they'll cut your commission. that's probably a bunch of baloney because, not since like, I don't know, Helena, back in the day they did maybe from 6 to 5 or something. But there came a point in the mortgage crisis where they were pushed to honor listing agreements. Now, if your listing agreement is an 8% commission, they might push back on that. They're not going to pay that. But by and large, your commission will be approved. However, I had a hard time with this, Lawrence, because like the negotiators from New Jersey, well, no, I met them in New Jersey. They're from Missouri that I'm working with. Their fee is on the buy side. And that was a little hard for me to understand initially. However, I came to understand it's an advantage, and it is 3%, or they do a maximum, like on a luxury property, they're going to cap out. They're not going to take 3%. But, for the lower price properties is 3% or a maximum of X. And the negotiators I work with, they're not gouging buyers. They're quite reasonable. When it's paid by the buyer, there's an advantage to that because the buyer's engaged, they're a client, and they have a direct communication with the negotiator. And I think this is kind of ties into the whole dynamic that we have nationally about buyer representation, being paid by the seller. It was a little hard for me to get my head around, but once I did, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Because in all honesty, no matter where it comes from on the HUD, it comes from the buyer funds, whether it shows on the seller side or on the buyer side. And the lien holder only cares about their net. So the advantage with the buyer, with the right negotiator, it really comes out to what price gets approved. And someone who's a true negotiator, not just a file pusher, not someone who's just a short sell sweatshop. If they're truly negotiating, this is where buyers are willing to pay a fee because it more than offsets. That's how they get their discount. The bottom line price that they get approved offsets the fee that they're approved. But in reality, it comes from the buyer funds. And, my last deal that I did with a law firm, so to speak, as a case in point, I had been introduced to that model and I was still uncomfortable, and it was a luxury. It was like, we started at 175, we ended up selling at 1425. I just couldn't get my head around it yet. This law firm, lawyers behaving badly. In Pennsylvania, we're a title state, so we don't use transactional attorneys. It's optional. And
Susanna, this was actually in Pennsylvania as well. This was in Kennett Square, and I moved since then. So the external company we used was CK Capital, and what we ended up just doing was saying, okay, we're gonna come back down in our offer by 3%, and CK Capital actually helped me with that and negotiated on our behalf to the bank. So it was a great experience. We just had to structure it a little bit differently. I was just not sure if that 3% fee is typical every time, or do the listing agents somehow or sometimes just communicate directly with the bank, and this third party is not always necessary.
Well, they're different business models, Lawrence. I'm glad you had a good experience. I've had a good experience with this model as well. And with my negotiator, it's negotiable. It depends on the situation. But the negotiator communicates with the bank in my situation when you're paying that fee, not the listing agent.
Right. Yeah, that's what they did too. They negotiated on our behalf with the bank and the sellers, I believe.
Yeah. Now, there's an agent in California that Lily and I've connected with, who's good at negotiations, and he does it for a referral, like a commission split. So he's not charging an additional fee for the negotiation. He's taking from the commission and then he charges a little bit more. So the various different business structures. However, and what's key to me is that relationship, that your buyer, and I became a fan of that model, Lawrence, actually, after I got my head around it and started using it, because it's more transparent and it's more empowering for the buyer and the buyer's agent. And everybody's like more collaborative, which is what works well, when everyone's collaborating. I have had short sales go sideways where the buyer agent, for some reason, felt that if they kept pushing back, I think they felt like they were negotiating. He said, when one of those things came up, even though I had coached, we're going to need this, there'll be times we need this document, blah, blah, blah. He literally got really snarky and said, well, we've had to wait. I'm going to get it to you when I get it to you. And consequently, the file was closed and we had to start all over. It did. I imagine he felt like he was being a negotiator or advocating for his client, but he actually undermined his client's success and got in the way of his client by doing that. So I always propose and support collaboration and cooperation, especially with the short sale. So I'm glad you had that experience.
Well, thanks, Susanna. And actually, you know, this property, this specific one didn't appraise. So they were involved in that as well. We had to go find additional comps and they negotiated again on our behalf with the bank to get the price up. So all in all, it was a great experience having that third-party company involved.
Awesome. Good to hear. Good to hear. And nice to meet you. I
Likewise,
lived
thank
in
you.
Kennett Square briefly when I first moved to Pennsylvania. It's a beautiful area. Yeah. Okay, so we have made it an hour. I did record this. I'm going to make it available. If I may, I'll just screen share briefly with you. I want to show you how where's my Google Chrome. Had a couple tidbits I was going to share with you guys. What I've done, you know, and those of you that went through my training, I tried to share information via Google links and videos. I'm putting everything into this orientation, breaking it into small, shorter videos so that you can have, you know, it's basically we did a 4-week training. I'm calling it 4 modules. Like the first one is an orientation. I don't have all the content built into here. I'm going to share it with you later if you're interested. To make this self-paced training, because when we did these Zoom calls, it's very hard. You know, we're all very busy to access, you know, to commit, you know, an hour to 2 hours to the discussion. This way also you can access the videos as you wish, you know, breaking in some of the topics like we talked about. These are the basics, like why is short sale, pros and cons. And then, you know, here I'll put more information about negotiators. You'll have that. CDPE training, information there, marketing examples, you know, the several people, including, I think I have Williams trifold in here that he flashed for us, and different things that you can access as examples. These are Clubhouse replays, just information, you know, easy access. These are Mastermind recordings. So this is how I've converted everything into a self-paced course that if you're interested in learning more, let me know. The CDPE, I highly recommend. I wanted to give you a back view of CDPE and why, if you're going to be involved, like if you go through the orientation and you want to know more, I strongly suggest it. Their price is $4.99 for a 4-week course. And then you get all of these short sale forms. You know, you get some detail, plus you get to network nationally. It is a designation that you can put in your marketing. There's logos, there's homeowner presentations, you know, where you can have a listing presentation. Frankly, there's a lot more here than I even use. And then this is the actual course. So it's a video-based course. So you have information that you can access, and everything is just online, because I think, you know, if you're interested, then let me know. I'll set that up. I'm not trying to just flash and share, but what I did was, I have been burned on training. I don't know about any of you, you know, where I have signed up where it's over $1,000 and then they pack all this information in and I can't absorb it in the 4 weeks, and then they want $99 a month. I've done that a couple times, and you know, then I keep paying the $99 because it's like a gym membership. Like, I know I need to do it. I don't want to lose the information, and it's just like a trap. And of course, those were marketing coachings, and I think Clubhouse has put those kind of resources, as well as EXP. We have so much training available. It's like you're going to a conference every day. Which session should I go to? So those are kind of going out of So this is a $99 one-time fee. For those of you that went through the class before, I'm going to share it with you as a resource. But then we'll have a monthly mastermind like this, and I'm hosting a room every week on Clubhouse to be available for question and answer, brainstorming. You know, I have people that, you know, call me to put me on the phone with a homeowner because I have been where they are. I've been through foreclosure and happy to do those third-party calls. And it's really meant to be a mastermind that we can, you know, like we create a national network of agents helping each other, because it isn't easy. You know, every situation's different. One of the reasons I love working with a professional negotiator, because they're 150% into this. Every lender is different. Things are changing. You know, we can't begin to know every nuance or how to escalate certain situations, and depending on who owns the note and who the servicer is and the complications with the homeowner, it's impossible to know everything. I continually learn. 14 years into this, Helen, I don't know about you, but I've continuing to learn. So it isn't meant to be a one and done, you know, but really to be an ongoing resource that you can. And every time I find a good video, Chris, good to see you. He was sharing something with me. I'll add those videos as a resource, anything that might be helpful. So that's the idea. Always open to ways to make things easier, you know, and more accessible, because we are going against the grain. Most people are ignoring this segment. So we have to help each other, in my opinion. You know, I feel like we need to help each other, help homeowners, you know, and that's my passion. So any questions before everybody goes to dinner? Or this week on Clubhouse, I'm trying to find a good time to consistently have short sale foreclosure mastermind on Clubhouse. I originally scheduled something at 1 o'clock on Saturday Eastern time. I had to move it because of a client appointment. I moved it to 3 o'clock, but I don't know if like lunch and learn kind of time frame. I would really like to find a time every week that you could count on and be consistent, to just have a room open for Q&A, discussion, you know, what you're hearing, questions, you know, stay in touch with each other about foreclosures and short sales, distressed property owners. You know, Rob, you've been quiet tonight. I always love hearing you on Clubhouse and talking. So you all, I think, have my contact info. Let me know how I can help if you're interested in training. And
Susanna.
yeah.
Hey, so you'll just send us a link or to sign up, or we need to send you an email saying we're interested?
If you went through my training before, I'll just send you a link.
Okay.
If you're new, then yeah, you'll have to, there'll be a sign up through, it's phillyshortsales.org. I can put that in here if you want to sign up. That is to the training. But there are people, you know, who, if you're new to this and you want to go through the 4-week training, I'm making it easier for you than what the group of us that went through. We were doing 2 hours once a week for 4 weeks. And, you know, of course, that's tough when your realtor schedule between family and clients, really tough. And I had put the videos on YouTube, you know, recordings of the Zoom. Also, yeah, I'm breaking them into content so that it's one topic for 10 minutes, you know, 5 to 10 minutes, and then the next topic. However, what that leaves is the live Q&A like this. So that's why I want to have our monthly masterminds to, you know, share like we did tonight. Does that work for everybody?
Yes, it does. And I also want to say a few of y'all just sent me a direct message, I guess because I began with A instead of sending it to Susanna. So please check your chat to make sure you're sending it to Susanna and not myself.
Okay. Yeah, I put it in here, phillyshortsales.org. You can go ahead and sign up. There'll be, you'll get a confirmation, and I am in the process. It takes time to edit the videos. I am building out the content. The orientation's almost done. I have two more pieces to put in there. You can get started right away and happy to schedule. Honestly, I'm trying to also be a little, I have to protect my time. I get so passionate about this that, I don't want, I have other segments of my business that I also need to pay attention to. My pipeline is screaming at me. I need to be doing some expired calls. Yeah, so happy to be available, but I'm trying to make it like a clubhouse room and then a monthly mastermind. But if there's somebody, like you're in a situation or you're door knocking or you're talking to somebody, I've collaboratively worked with agents, like Lily and Yvette and Lamont and Lisa, where you meet somebody and you're not, you need someone who's experienced who also can relate to say, I've been where, I'm happy anytime, just call me. We'll do a 3-way phone call if you're reaching out to homeowners. Other than that, I think that's all I got. The news, like circling back to the beginning, there's more coming. You're in the right place at the right time. We're a little bit ahead of the curve, diving in and becoming knowledgeable and available. And marketing, we'll need to talk more about marketing because it's a great opportunity to build your SEO. There's some free ways to do that, creating your Google My Business profile, doing just real quickly, articles on LinkedIn get good SEO. I created a Facebook page years ago when I first moved to Philadelphia short sales business page. I think I only have like 600 followers. It gets top ranking for Philadelphia short sales because of the name and also I think the history, but a Facebook business page works really well. Start putting some content out. You're going to be ahead of the curve. Homeowners need you. And this market is growing by the day, by the week, right, Chris? Yeah, so we're in the right place at the right time to add this to our business profile and be empowered to help people and make money. It's a lie that you can't make money with short sales. It's a longer pipeline, perhaps, and there are. Every time I get frustrated, I think about how many times I've shown people property and they never buy, right? So how many times I door knock and I don't get anything? I have to put that in perspective. How many expired calls have you made and you don't get an opportunity? So we have to take it in the chin with this business, just like everything else. Yet there are, when it does work, it's so heartwarming. We've had tears at the kitchen counter, finding a buyer and seller match. It's an amazing feeling to be able to help somebody out of a difficult situation. Any closing thoughts from anybody? Yeah, it is recorded. I will put it in I'll send a link to everybody.
I just wanted to say, Susanna, it's always a pleasure and a wealth of information and how you approach things. You're very personable and exciting and energetic, but for me, and those are great things, but for me, you are very informative, and it is information that will always carry us through. I have found that you remind me of me in the sense that from a stock market perspective, I'll say, well, this company is overvalued or overpriced, and the stock will keep going up for another year or so. And, folks will say, well, I thought you said it was over. And then later on, the price tends to go down and recalibrate. And so it's not that I'm wrong, I'm early. And I think I've said this before in Clubhouse and other Zoom calls. I think you're early, but it's always better to be early than it is to be late. You mentioned, start now, you'll be ahead of the curve, start looking at foreclosures. Something you mentioned that does not leave my mind is that there'll likely be a lot of folks that are approaching the short sale, but they have a lot of equity in their homes. And so that's that. I don't think people take that into account and how to really work that out. But I think it's early, but it is spot on. And so thanks for that. I appreciate it. Just wanted to let you know I am here. So I'll be around, of course.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's always great to hear you and nice to see you tonight. I really appreciate your thoughts. And a couple people that were here, we had some really in-depth conversations, more from a Wall Street perspective, like what's going on with the economy. I have my theories, but it is, it's funny because, anecdotally, some of the discussions we had on Clubhouse, like the end of last year, beginning of this year, most realtors were, as you said, complete denial because we were still getting multiple offers, all, like Phoenix Market, some of the realtors and so on. Then come June, there was this complete shift, right? It was just that there were vulnerabilities in the market that we couldn't ignore. I didn't know exactly how. I hate to say, I'm not trying to be right. I'm just saying, we are now in a situation that people didn't see coming. A few of us did see the warning signs. However, and the fact that the press isn't covering it, was a little shocking to me. This gentleman from Bloomberg, his kind of lack of depth of any awareness on the complications with forbearances.
Who's that from Bloomberg?
I have to look at his, Rob, I'll have to get you his name. I don't want to disrespect him, and I do want to support him during a story. And it was funny too, because I quoted some discussions on Clubhouse. He said, "What's Clubhouse?" I was like,
Where have you been for the past pandemic,
And then I said, well, some of the voices on Club have moved to Twitter Spaces, but I don't think he's familiar with Twitter Spaces either. There's a reporter with Fortune, I think his name is Lance Lambert, that I've become a big fan of on Twitter Spaces and Twitter, who does a pretty good job of not just spitting out, these high level sound bites, but really going more depth on the housing market. But, our housing market is not being reported on well. And this is one of those shadow inventory they used to talk about. This is one of those shadow stories that's not being told. It's much more present than people are aware. So the beginning of this year, or around Q1, as we're having these discussions, when I was putting this class together, it was interesting because some of the agents I was talking to, like in areas like Miami, or they're very, very hot, multiple offer situations. When I went to Realty Track and would pull up the pre-foreclosures that are not at auction yet, the number that had equity, and many of them luxury properties, these properties with a high amount of equity were facing foreclosure, off market, no one's helping them, and there's the opportunity. I mean, I can go back, some of the people that were involved in the April class, May class, I would pull from Realty Track for them in their market. And some of those markets, like end of last year, I pulled from Realty Track, there wasn't a single pre-foreclosure in Atlanta, and that shifted very quickly. Austin, you were seeing some of those markets. Philadelphia, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania have consistently had problems with foreclosures. And but other areas, it was like, for somebody who was new in the business, they just couldn't get their head around that could even be possible. Yet that's unfolded very, very quickly. And I think some of the agents that I collaborate with who are here tonight and who've gone, we're talking about the uptick. I don't know what you're seeing, Fred, in New York, but I think Lily was talking about in her area of California, it's like twice as many just within a matter of weeks, seeing the numbers go up in terms of foreclosure filings. So it's a little unnerving. And unfortunately, a lot of realtors I network, they're looking at analyzing foreclosure from what's on the MLS, but that's like the tail of the dog, and in fact, most of them are going to be sold before they ever get to MLS. They're being sold as, notes, there are a lot of defaulted notes that are being sold, and some of those might end up in foreclosure in 3 years. There are a lot of things happening behind the scenes now that it's not just what's on the MLS, so we can't measure foreclosures by what's on the MLS. We have to backtrack into the process. And that's why I focus on pre-foreclosure and how we can identify those opportunities and find, especially with the inventory being low. That was why earlier this year, I'm like, okay, we have these homeowners with equity going to auction, and we have these buyers who can't find a home, or an investor who can't find a property. Let's matchmake them, right? Let's connect the dots, create opportunity for investors, create opportunity for buyers, and help this homeowner save their equity and save their credit. So that was the brainstorm behind it. So it's a little different conversation. The knowledge, basically, I feel like the short sale knowledge is critical, but to get to that conversation, you've got to be able to talk to a homeowner coming out of forbearance who doesn't want to sell. That's the gateway conversation in a way. in my opinion, in private.
I think that's pretty interesting. And I dropped a few things in the chat. So to circle back to that, you know, what one of my idols will say about different corporate events, right? So far in the stock market, when you read about it in the journal, it might be a little bit too late, right? And that reminds me, it's similar to what you were just saying about, you know, some realtors, when they're looking for it on the MLS, that sounds like it might be a little too late. You're looking for what the public and everybody in the world knows now. And, you know, you may have not missed the move, but you are late to the game and now entering what can be conceivably called a saturated market, right? So it takes a broader, not broad, just a deep, you have to dig a deeper well. You've got to be able to fish in a deeper spot, and that you can't find that. You somewhat have to create that, right? And I'm not necessarily saying, you know, bust out a subscription to Barron's on the weekend or a daily to the Journal and the Financial Times and New York Times, et cetera, et cetera. Although, you know, I have those and it's good to aggregate information, but you have to have access to a wider variety of information to take into account what an educated guess, you know, would likely happen. And if you've, and I'm looking, and I'm in my office, as I'm looking at my books, right? If you have, let me rephrase, I think it also would serve us as business folks, right? To take and to take a look at history. If you were in the real estate space in some capacity from 2004 maybe until 2009, that's a good chunk right there. You've seen the market climb, fall, climb, and plateau, right? And things of that nature. So you could have learned a lot then. And even if you weren't in it, there's empirical evidence and a wide array of information to pull from to say, hey, what happened last time when foreclosures were creeping up, when, you know, mortgage-backed assets and securities the markets were, you know, seizing up for those things? What happened when interest rates, you know, rose then? And although history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes. And that can be a good barometer to judge what to do going forward. Some folks that I know in the real estate market, they have already been trained or working, you know, building processes and automations and systems for how to get things done. As you mentioned, your eloquent power team, Susanna, they've already got a team that they've learned each other, how to work with one another, and, you know, how to get things moving to obviously, yes, make money, but to obviously also help the folks that need that need the help, their clients, being able to make sure that their clients come out of that, like a deficiency judgment, right? Here in Chicago, Cook County, you are opening yourself up to a lawsuit if you don't at least attempt to, you know, have the bank waive that deficiency, mortgager waive that deficiency judgment. Like, that's malpractice if you don't at least attempt. So, you know, if you're new to this, you wouldn't know that. You're like, oh, well, you know, you're gonna have to put this on your taxes at 1099-C, you know, things of that nature. But you know, I just encourage all of us to get educated. I know there's a lot of information out there. You've explained it yourself, Susanna, especially with EXP. But you know, take a week and just wade through it. Start at 8 a.m. and start going through it and see where you come out on the end. So I'm sorry about the long-winded response, but again, I just feel like we talk the same language a little differently but we say the same thing. You have to be educated. You've got to, you know, build a team, and you've got to be able to, even if you don't have that, have the institutional experience to develop it, connect with it, find it. And so I dropped a few things in the chat. There's a book by Joe Greenblatt, great author and portfolio manager, hedge fund manager. It talks more about the stock market, but it can give you a frame of reference, a frame of mind to just add to your repertoire. Okay, so let me look for corporate events, right? Publicly traded REITs versus private REITs and things of that nature. And Matt, I think I spelled it right, Matt Levine, Levine, another Bloomberg author, his stuff is dry, Susanna. His stuff is really, I mean, and I worked on Wall Street. It's pretty dry, but they're great articles that talk about a wide array of things that you could help build your mental models to operate in this business in. So just wanted to add that. I'm Rob, and I'm done being long-winded. You're still muted, Susanna.
Whoops, it's like on Clubhouse when I can't move my thumb fast enough. Sorry about that. Fred, any insights on the market that you're seeing that you'd like to share with us before we go?
No, I just a couple statistics that I just saw that I recorded from Adam ATTOM is the data. They put out a lot of information, foreclosures, pre-foreclosures. So California is leading, Florida is next, Texas, Illinois, and then New York. I'm just noticing that slowly the numbers are coming up because I'm just looking at my caseload in itself. And that's reflective of something that's reflective of an increase. That's the best I could say right now. But definitely in the top ranking in the country, New York State ranks number 5. I think that's pretty significant.
Thank you so much. I've got a training actually starting in half an hour. So I'm gonna go ahead and close this out, but I will follow up with somebody who is just a Zoom user, wanted the CDPE training. I think they've left, but I'll send a link, and I'll also send the link to CDPE to everybody who signed up or that I've tagged you in my Google profile. Of course, Fred's actually I think was going to go through the training or has to be a trainer in CDPE. But we're always networking. I just got a text from Chris, who was on. His brother knows the CK Capital, who was mentioned. Like, anybody that you want to share, I'll add to that resource. Like Reginald Sylvester, I'm finding is a good negotiator in California. And Lily is working with him with a client right now. He also is putting together some training. I don't know anything about it, but when he has that together, I'll share it in case you're interested. He's the one I mentioned who does negotiation. I know him through Clubhouse. I haven't worked with him yet, but I do have a high regard for him, and he does a commission split. So it's important to have multiple resources. I can only speak to the people that I've worked with personally. However, if there's someone you recommend that we can add, I want this to be sort of a collective resource for all of us to use. And this is open to all brokerages. You know, I know quite a few people through the workplace and EXP have signed up for this, but this is no affiliation necessary, that we're all helping each other regardless of, it doesn't matter what jersey you wear. That isn't what this is about. This is about realtors helping each other and networking across the country, and investors. I've had other people who aren't realtors join the classes and go through this because they're working directly with distressed homeowners or interested in working with distressed homeowners and finding a way to make that happen. So I'm so touched, and it's always great to see you and connect with you. We don't get to meet in person often, but for one of these days, I'm going to surprise you and we'll do lunch in New York. Okay. Can't wait to meet you.
I did drop that article. Funny thing, again, as I think Robert just said about sharing information as well. So we happen to read the same article. I dropped it in the chat there. It was a very insightful article. I just read it yesterday, and you're right. Lance is amazing. He really digs deep. I put his profile site, and then just that particular article will be worthy of reading, I believe.
Some of the voices that I was following on Clubhouse at a high level have moved over to Twitter Spaces, which has reactive, like I've been listening and following certain people on Twitter to get that insight. Like I was really hungry on Clubhouse last year to hear from different industry experts, real estate, Wall Street, like what the heck's going on. And, and so that's how I discovered him actually in the Twitter discussions. And I was like how he breaks things down, and he's not just looking at, he's actually picking apart some of the stats. Like that's one of the things, like the news will say, oh, the market's falling 30%. Well, in Phoenix, where it went up 40%, maybe it's down 30%, but it's still 10% above where it was in 2019. And that's the trouble with statistics, is from what to what, where, right? You know, it isn't just a sound bite. You know, obviously we have some ripples through the economy and some struggles in housing, and we're feeling it in Philadelphia, you know, but it isn't like, it's somewhere between, you know, like we had the news saying there's not going to be a problem. It's not 2008. Now you have the news saying the whole market's falling apart, you know, and doomsday. And the truth is somewhere in between, right? But in terms of the foreclosure market, unfortunately, and I don't think it's going to be a big wave in terms of the number that we had in the mortgage crisis. However, it's much more than what the news had been anticipating. And there's the silent suffering of these people coming out of forbearance and losing equity. And unfortunately, I think I've had some discussions with some people smarter than me who are seeing the risk for some of the people who overpaid in the past couple of years, as they see, you know, their equity declining, all kinds of situations. So again, that comes back to, if you want to make this a part of your business, you know, I'm not saying, you know, you might want to base your whole business on it. That's great. But if you want to make it part of your business, how to do that effectively is the purpose behind what I've put together. So thank you guys. I'm going to close out here, and I'm all, you know, shoot me an email, text. Let's talk on Clubhouse. Let's keep the conversations going. Have a great evening. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Thank you, Susanna.
Bye.
Good night.